All right, great. Welcome, everyone. We are excited to have you all here for our TPG Demo Day. And we're really excited to hear from Luke and Elias Fretwell today because we have a father-son combo on today talking about their adventures coding with government data. And it's a first for us to hear from a high school student, but this is really what we're aiming for with the demo days that we have here at TPG, which is to elevate the voices and work of people who may not always be highly visible in the space, but who are really doing the work and often making the biggest difference in terms of helping government work better. So we're really excited to chat with Luke and Elias in a moment. But first, we will take a second to introduce the organization to those of you that haven't joined us before. So we are Technologists for the Public Good, or TPG, and we're a professional association supporting the people who are reimagining how government serves the public. So this means our membership is made up of designers, developers, data scientists, researchers, government employees, so many more roles, but that are all working towards the same goal of improving public services. So as I mentioned, these demo days are just one way that we're making a platform for our fellow technologists to share and learn from each other. And so we're really excited that you're all here today to share with us. And we encourage you to keep your video on or turn it on if you're comfortable to do so. But do stay on mute until we have a Q&A and discussion after Luke and Elias's talk. And we always like to have a little icebreaker to get to know each other. So that's what you see on the slide here. Since today, the demo centers a lot on the idea of civic hacking. That's something that a lot of people have different definitions around. Maybe it's sometimes a misunderstood topic. So we wanted to invite each of you, based on your experience, to just type into the chat, what do you think that civic hacking is? So before we hear from Luke and Elias on their definition and what they've been doing around it, we just want to hear from all the perspectives that are here today. And it's a small and cozy group, so we do want to hear from everyone. So please don't hesitate to add your voice in there so we can get a range of answers, regardless of your level of familiarity with civic hacking. What do you think that it is? And as folks are getting that typed into the chat, we will go ahead and go quickly over the agenda for today. We're going to meet Luke and Elias, get to know a little bit about them and their work and set up what they've been working on. Then we're going to hand it over to them to tell us about their adventures coding with government data and everything that they learned doing that. And then we're going to have a space for Q&A and discussion, and we'll definitely hope that everyone comes off the mic, talks with us, shares perspectives, maybe your own experiences with similar civic hacking or playing with government data. So we'll have plenty of time for that. And then at the closing, we'll share a little more information about the organization and how you can become a member for free. We have a lot of events and other good benefits, so that's something you'll want to hear about. And we also have at the end an optional group photo. So just as a heads up, that's something we like to close with to have a little memento of our time together. And that's something that we can share out on our post-event promotions and things like that. So of course it's totally optional and you can leave your video off if you don't want to participate, but we hope that everyone will pause and say cheese with us for a second at the end. So that's totally up to you. But with that, let's see what kind of definitions that we have flowing in for what is civic hacking. Got to open my chat and see what people have put. Thank you for your contributions there. Gives us a little bit of a sense of where people are coming from on that definition, because this is something Luke and Elias will be speaking to in a minute, because they have their own story to tell around that, of course. So with that, we're going to dive into introductions and meet with our guests for the evening. So starting with Luke Fretwell. Luke, as many of you know, has been a champion of open source, open data, and public participation in government throughout his career. He's the co-founder of Proud City, which is a platform that supports local government digital services, And he also maintains the website GovFresh, where he writes about democracy and technology and interviews all kinds of folks who are doing the work of opening up government and engaging the public. And of course, today we'll also see how his passion for participatory government has started to rub off on the next generation. So, Luke, I'll let you share a little more about yourself and your work, and especially about your view of the term civic hacking and how that theme has informed your work over the years.
I think you're muted,
I am muted. Thank you. Thanks, Melinda, for that introduction. Thanks, everybody, for being here and having us. It's a little surreal to have your son presenting to your peers. I think civic hacking to me is really building, in the broadest context, is just building better democracy outside the lines of, the traditional cultural and rules of bureaucracy. We have in the context of civic tech, we use open data and open source to build things that are non-traditional or not within the context of an RFP or the traditional workings of a digital service firm. I see some digital service folks here, but there's civic hackers, all types of civic hackers, beyond just the hoodies and the t-shirts and the 12-year-old, 15-year-old kids. It's really just thinking outside, working and thinking outside the lines of kind of the traditional rules of the bureaucracy. And I would say, ideally it's working with open data that's easily acceptable and open source, and also working collaboratively with public officials in a very constructive way.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we'll go ahead and meet Elias now, unless you wanted to share more about any of your background and how that played into what you're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I mean, I think folks who have worked with me know that I am an open source, open data meets government zealot, but also just building things and thinking differently about sort of the traditional ways of our industry. And I've been fortunate enough to work with folks across the spectrum, from building new media companies to digital service firms to even working with agencies and helping them rethink how to work and just build something different in a different way.
And when you have your kiddo come on today, it makes us all think about how, many of us have worked in the similar spaces, and we have our kids, especially now in these times, often at home watching us work. And it makes you wonder how much, they're picking up. And I guess we're going to find out a little bit about how that worked in your house today. So the next, we're going to meet Elias. And Elias, we're super stoked to have a student and someone of your age come on and talk to us, because for a lot of people here today, we've been working in this space either as government employees or serving government, and we often talk about how important it is for the next generation to take an interest in participating in government. So we're very excited to hear about your adventures doing that. But first, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and what you like to do at school or at home, just kind of who you are?
Yeah, I'm a sophomore in high school, and I like to do piano or draw and anything else you want.
Yeah, I heard that you started a club, a coding club of some sort. Can you tell us a little bit about how that worked?
Yeah, it started off as like a small gathering at our house, and then I think we're gonna go over that, but it started to grow a lot bigger and like expand to a lot more people.
That's awesome. And what would you say sort of first tweaked your interest in coding or, digging into that side of things?
Um, I think like the first introduction to coding of any sort was like a friend showing me Scratch, which is just like a simple beginner block coding language. And then it sort of got more advanced from there.
It's great. It's also great that there's so many of these little programs and sort of entry-level stuff that gets kids interested in coding and similar activities from an early age. I think it kind of demystifies it a little bit, and you start to realize how it's all built on just kind of foundational pieces that can get more and more complex, and then you start to see you're building real cool things. So that's a great advantage that y'all have at your age. Well, thank you for introducing yourself, Elias. I think I will go ahead and let you screen share, and you and your dad can tell us a little bit about all this adventure you've been working on.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, Melinda. I love these responses in here. So Elias is going to share this. Let me control his screen, which I think I'm able to do. I am. Yeah, I mean, this is us. This is his axolotl shirt that we got in Mexico City recently. And he was very excited to go down there and see where axolotls live, or maybe they don't anymore, but they lived up there. That's sort of the epicenter. Before we get into the demo, I want to set context because I think for those of you who are parents or people who are listening to this, there's a context around like how can you bring your kids, introduce your kids to coding, but also I think there's a layer of it for within our industry about how we talk about getting people into, quote, the pipeline. And there's a role that government has, there's a role that digital service firms have, and there's a role that people who work in our industry have in working outside of their traditional sort of day jobs and thinking. So for Elias, and as he mentioned, he started learning Scratch, which Scratch is a program that MIT does. It's free. You can create an account, and it's, like you said, block coding. You just kind of drag and drop and create all types of things, and you can create games. You can create, there's so many things that you can do. I first heard about it at our library had a maker fair, and then he started learning more about it with his friends. And then we decided to create a coding club, and he invited his friends over. He called it Narwhal Coding. That's the other animal that he is fascinated with. And I'll kind of go through it quickly, but it was essentially a club where kids would come and hack, and the rules were that you couldn't do games. You could only code. You could use YouTube for instructional videos, but that was it. And you couldn't ask me for advice or help because I refused to learn Scratch, and I made Elias and his friends be responsible for helping each other, which was fun to watch. And it just kind of grew. And then we ended up working with a library, and they had I think it was every 2 weeks, we'd meet at the library for 2 hours and then, start to code. And a lot of other people started to come. And then COVID happened, and there were some other dynamics at the library. But COVID ultimately put an end to it. And then, he just evolved. I started teaching him HTML and CSS, not JavaScript. He taught himself that because I know nothing JavaScript. And then he really started talking about Minecraft, doing a lot of Minecraft, and then building his own mods, which, Elias, do you want to explain what mods are?
It's like making your own content for the game beyond what just the developers have done. So if there's something that you want to see in or you want to do, you'd make a mod to add that in.
Yeah. so the go down on it. So phase one, like Elias said, we just had people at our house. This is our backyard, put people outside. And then as it got bigger, we started, and the weather wasn't reliable, rain, we started pulling tables from outside and hosting people in the living room. And then finally, I was like, we need to move to the library. And so I would start to rent rooms at our library. We have, the study rooms or the quiet rooms or whatever, and you could rent them for 2 hours for free. So I would rent them, and then the kids would start to come. And then, a couple times it spilled over, and they just started doing them outside on the balcony there. And it's so funny to see this photo on the left because these kids are so young. And before we got on, I was just saying, like, the girl in the middle on the left at the end, she now has her driver's permit and is driving around our town, which makes me nervous. And then phase three was when we worked with the library. There was a man named Orlando Guzman who I started to talk to, and he sponsored us, and we did it at the library. He opened up the computers and the computer lab, and for 2 hours we would go and we'd get this, have access to the lab, and he would set it up and the kids would come, and it was the same thing. It was really cool because it was the same kind of rules that we did at our house. And then the only difference was at the end we had demos, so kids would go up and do like 15 seconds or a minute or whatever. It was like short, and they would just do demos. And I just remember the first time we did a demo and a kid presented their thing, and it was just kind of quiet. Everybody was like, wait for their, there was just this moment, and I just started clapping, and then everybody started clapping, and the whole, like, it was on, all the kids like wanted a demo, and you just saw this like sense of fun and excitement. And it was just really a great opportunity. You can see on the right, Orlando had like all this, hardware stuff. Is it Makey, Elias?
Yeah.
And you could like create games and things like that. So how we started, during COVID, as everybody, a lot of people experienced, he really started to finish school quickly. We were doing the online stuff, and it started to get a little frustrating, as I'm sure folks can empathize with. And, really thinking about how can I channel that energy? How can we, fill the next, 5 hours or whatever? So we went on a walk, and I started to talk to him. And, by this time I knew he was like technically savvy. And we were walking our dog, and I started to explain, like, you can build applications with government data that essentially just updates on its own, and its application, program and interface, API. And so I explained all this to him and why it's really great, because you just build the thing and then pull the data, and, it sort of works on its own. So he comes back, and I'm in my office, and there's a desk over on this side. He comes back, and he has this computer, and within like an hour or two, he says, okay, I got it. And I'm like, oh, cool. He like read up on APIs, and he understands APIs now. And then I walk over, and he's got a drop down. And I was saying, like, Census has information, CDC has COVID data, and he's got 2 drop downs that are, or it might have been one, and he clicks on the drop down, and he clicks California. It was a state drop down. He clicks California, and it says population, and it gives the population. And then what was it, Elias? The number of COVID cases, or it was vaccinations, right? So, and the number of vaccines at the time of Californians that got vaccines. And at that moment, I was just like, I am irrelevant in the job market, because a 12-year-old just took everything that I know and is now going to be my boss. So it was pretty wild to see. It was like a moment of, I didn't realize like how much he had been sort of teaching himself. And so then I started to talk to him about hacking and civic hacking. And I laid down some ground rules, because I didn't want to be in the news. I didn't want him to be in the news. I don't want either one of us to get arrested. So I said that he could not hack governments, ours or foreign, or large corporations. That was the rule. And then we got a book called Go Hack Yourself, which is, the subtitle is An Ethical Approach to Cyber Attacks and Defense. And he kind of went through it and, went through the chapters and started to do all the little hacks that are out there, which is, it was fun. Like, it's very easy it's easy-ish for kids. But it was a fun kind of experiment in setting the foundation for the difference between, bad hackers and good hackers, civic hackers. And then basically just talk about the ground rules, right? Like, use government data. We wanted to build without a purpose. This isn't like human-centered design where we're building something for somebody. We're just hacking around and finding out. And nothing needs to be perfect. Like, it can be buggy. It is what it is. And just continuously learn. Like, there's a lot of things that we learned just because we're like, well, let's do this and we can learn how to do it. And then, last, of course, have fun. So we built everything on a subdomain off of GovFresh. You can find it at usa.govfresh.com. And basically, I'd recommend things, and we talk about kind of general functionality, and then he would start building a live prototype, and then I would add the front end design and make suggestions, which he was not always amenable to. But it was a good exercise in like having a constructive conversation. And then eventually he started using the design system to build on his own. So the government agencies Civic hacked, the National Geodetic Survey, which I had never heard of before, NASA, National Archives, CAL FIRE, CISA, the CDC, the National Park Service, USA Jobs, and FDA. And the tools we used, he actually introduced me. Elias, I don't even remember what I used before VSC, but we used VSC for the coding and Bootstrap for the front end and OpenEmoji for the icons that you'll see. And we use Public Sans font for which is a government built font. I think GSA built it. Open source font and Font Awesome for some iconography. And then Wave, I introduced him to web accessibility. So we were building it in an accessible way. And then these other things over here. So Leaflet for the maps, and OpenStreetMap and Google Maps for some of the mapping stuff. And then everything we pushed on GitHub. And then another thing that he actually introduced me to, or actually started using, was Discord, where we would like chat code or things like that into it. And so we built, a bunch of random things. We just would look for data and built bunch of random things. We built COVID dashboard, executive branch directory, a Congress directory, national NASA picture of the day, a national parks directory, federal job search, the survey markers, notifiable diseases map, and approved medicines directory. And I'm just checking this chat in here. So demo time. Elias, you want to take it over and do the demo?
Sure. You can still see everything.
Yep, we can see the homepage.
All right, so this is the homepage for all our projects. It's got you're still moving your mouse, so it's messing with the.
Oh, sorry, I'm trying to mute. I won't touch anything.
It's got the agencies listing and the congressional directory, the parks directory, and the survey marker map, the photo of the day from NASA, FDA approved drugs, the disease map and vaccination information, cybersecurity updates, and the jobs listing. So our first thing we're demoing is the congressional directory, and that data comes from the Library of Congress. So it's got the representatives and senators and you can click, you can go to one of the pages and it'll load for a little bit. And then it's got a list of all the senators. You can see their picture and their name, state they represent, and what party they are. And then it's got a little border with the color for their party. And if you can see all the senators. And if you click on one of them, it'll take you to their individual page, which also has their name, state, party, and photo. And it's also got their contact information, how long and when they've served, and then their 250 or however many they have most recent legislation they sponsored. And then for the representatives, it's the same. It's got their name with their state, district, and party, and then their contact terms and their legislation. And then we're just moving on to the next thing, right? Are we doing questions?
Well, I think we're just going to do the demo, and we'll ask questions at the end, or they'll ask questions at the end.
All right, and then next is the parks directory, and that has all the national parks, and this data comes from the National Park Service. So this is this is the list of the parks, and then if you go to one of their pages, it'll show their name, the park's name, and then there's some small description of the park, how to contact the park, when it's open, and then what you can do. And if you click one of these links, it'll show you other parks that have that activity, where to camp at the park, and then how to get there, as well as its address, parking information, where to park, lots, what it costs to get in, park passes, and then there's weather data. This comes from, I think it's the National Weather Service. And you can see the forecast for the park and the state the park is in. And after that are photos of the park from the Park Service. And after photos, it's some videos that the Park Service has. And you can click it and it'll take you to the video page on NPS website. And then some articles about the park. And those also go to the article page on the NPS site. And then the tags so you can find other parks like it. And then next is the jobs listing. So you can search by, and this is from USA Jobs. So these are just federal government jobs. So you can search by like what you're doing, what the job title is, who you're working for, where it is, and the risk or sensitivity, how much you're working, if you are fine moving, and then the security clearance you need. And you can go down and you can sort by when you have to submit your application by the name of the organization, how much you're getting paid, or where it is. And then it's got the list of jobs that match your search. And if you click one of them, it'll take you to the job page, and you can see the pay, schedule, if you can work from home, and the openings. And that's a data error from USA Jobs. So it's not all perfect, but most of it works. And you can see the agency that it's for, and then after that is a description of the job and your duties and the requirements for the job, the qualifications you need, documents you need to have, benefits you get, any other information that the job listing has, and where you can work from. And then there's contact information, so email, phone, and maybe a website if they have it, when you have to apply by. And then there's the link to the application page, and you can see the USA Jobs page 2, and then this also has categories, so you can find other jobs that are like it. And next is fires. I'm gonna refresh, and it's gonna take a little bit to load.
That's a great loading icon, though.
Okay, here we go. So this is all the fires that are big enough to have a perimeter tracked in the last 25 years. So there's a lot of them. Are you moving my mouse? So you can see all the fires, and then you can go over to the filter. And if you want to see ones from like a certain year, you can do that. Or by who took care of the fire and what caused it. So if you want to see all the ones that were caused by a power line, you can click it. It'll update, and you can see that these were all caused by a power line. You can zoom in over here, and if you click a fire, it'll bring up the information for it. So this one's, it'll tell you where it started, how big it was, and then how long it was burning and who was in charge of it. And then there's settings. You can change the units and the colors for the fire. So if you want this to be purple instead of red, you can change it. I think that's all for the fires. And last is survey markers. So this is a map of government survey markers, which are things they put down to help define property borders or coordinates or elevation. And it just helps architects, construction people know where they're working, understand the geography of the area. So it's got a map of them. There's black dots for ones that still exist, and then the gray dots are ones that haven't been found or are known to be destroyed. And then you can zoom in, and if you click one of the black dots, or I guess one of the gray ones too, it'll open up the page so you can see the ID, the coordinates, and that takes you to the map if you want directions. It'll tell you what type of survey marker it is and what it's put in. And then there's the description from the people who put it down. and that tells you how to get to it, where it is, how to find it exactly. And after that, if it has pictures, the pictures show up. And at the bottom, there's the history for it. And you can click this button and it'll take you to the NGS recovery form. So if you found it or weren't able to find it, this is how you let them know so they don't have to go out and look for each one. People can do it on their own. So you just give them the information and how you found it and pictures. And then back on the map, you can click this button to go back. If you're lost on the map, you can go back to where you are or bring up the information for this. And then there's settings. You can change how big of a circle you want to show markers for. Anything to like hide. Anything you put in here will get grayed out. And you can search if there's a specific place you want to go, you can search for that. And I think that's it, right?
Yeah, do you want to show the NASA picture of the day?
Sure.
He did not want to do this. He didn't think it was cool enough. Yeah, and just a note on the this is the photo of the day, which is funny because now I have this set as my browser home screen when it comes up, this page. And the interesting thing about this is we coded this to be in dark mode because it was the NASA photo. So just one thing on the geomarks. So we created this as this idea. I don't know how Elias, how did you find out about these things?
YouTube.
Of course. We found out about these, and then Elias, how did you find the data? Was that on YouTube too? Or did you just go and pull that?
NGS has a map, but it's not very useful.
Yeah. So then he took the data and he tell him what you did with the data, how the data was, how you found it, and then what you did to be able to get it into the app that you created.
So on the NGS site for this, they have they have files for all the markers in every state. So I just downloaded that and I wrote a program because the computer can't understand this. But we can kind of read it, but a computer can't. So I had to make a program to turn this into something a computer can understand a lot easier. So that was a challenge that we had to deal with for this. And now I have the data, and that's what I use my data instead of this to do the map.
Yeah, and so what's interesting about this is that we actually built this app and then started going and looking for survey markers. So folks who are familiar with geocache or Pokemon, right? It's that same concept of like this geolocation thing that you go and find and capture or whatever. And so we actually spent a lot of time kind of driving around the Bay Area, nerding out about this, and then submitting it to the NGS, and updating. I mean, I don't know if we've seen any of ours be updated and added, but Elias would take a picture and use the app and submit it. And, we would go around and look for them. And we were going to places and we wouldn't find them. And then he developed a way to say if they were lost or what was it, broken or not found, that we would gray them out. So then we would be driving around to places where we would most likely actually find them. But it was fun. We saw a lot of the Bay Area that we have never seen before. That I've been here in the Bay Area for 25 years, and we saw a ton of the Bay Area that never would imagine seeing. So for folks who have kids and want to keep them busy, this is a fun thing to do. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some slides that we have that kind of retrospect. But Melinda, I don't know if you want to open it up for questions or if you want us to just keep going.
Well, we would love to hear the retrospection, and there are a few questions, so we'll let you get through this part. But first, I'm just going to make sure Elias knows that the chat is full of compliments on this work and also on your presentation, Elias. We thank you very much for taking the time to be so thorough and share what you've been working on. It's really, really great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate these comments in the chat. Okay, well, let me just kind of go through this. He only wanted to do the demo, which is why I wanted to give him as much opportunity to share his thoughts on this, but he just wanted to do the demo. When we talk through these, how government can do data better, human, machine readable, it's not, everybody here knows this. There were, like Elias said, he had to parse all this data out with a PDF extractor and, do all that himself. Really API first and actually use the data. Elias and I were on a podcast with Government Technology, and he said, it was the first time he said it, but Paul Taylor, who interviewed him, asked him, what was his advice? And he said, governments should use their APIs because then they'll know what's not working, what's working, and what's not working. So I thought that was really important, because if you look at some of the data, like he was showing with USA Jobs, right, it's like all one block of text. But if you look at USA Jobs on the USA Jobs website, the data is broken out and they're formatting that after, or they're, just not pulling the same data. So, and I think that's a problem. That was one of the, this minor flaw in the open data movement, is the government pushed it out, but really wasn't using the data. So, and then there was also issues with the APIs. They just weren't working. And I think that's one of the values of civic hacking is, Elias helped CAL FIRE, the Library of Congress, and I think somebody else, understand that their APIs weren't working properly. And then, the thorough description of what the data is, this data does this, and also a better description of the data fields, and really just a data standard for all agencies. Agencies should be following one particular standard. And feedback loops, being able to submit a comment to GitHub was super helpful. We got a response and they closed it out, which was really cool for Elias to see that, the Library of Congress responded to a bug that he submitted. And, CAL FIRE, I'm fortunate enough to have friends of friends in high places. So we reached out and had to work through the bureaucracy to find people, and they helped us. But because there was no feedback loop. And I'm ready for this question, Dustin. And updates, right? Being as a data consumer, right? If you're doing pulling data, being updated, the API doesn't work anymore, or we added these new data points to the API, really having that ability to subscribe to updates. A lot of it is just sort of jumbled data, not organized, not structured or formatted, and there's no feedback loops, and there's no way to understand if the API has been cut or not. You just find out. And just some advice. What's that?
I want to add on to that. Finding data's kind of hard.
Yeah.
Especially specifically on the CAL FIRE thing. it's like one small section of the home page. So if you search for CAL FIRE API, I actually don't think anything comes up. So it's, and like finding for everyone, there's the data.gov directory, but it's got everything, so it's hard to find specific thing you're looking for if you want. Some of it's useful for like research, but it's hard to find something that is like updating or relevant, and also understanding what you're getting.
Yeah, there were several times where I wanted him to redo, the whole like USA.gov fresh was this idea of like, if we reimagined USA.gov, what would it look like? And I don't know, I didn't do that. And I was like trying to get him like, let's redo data.gov. He didn't want to do that. Yeah, it's just the findability. It's really hard. I mean, I think there could be some investments in data.gov to make it simpler and make it much better to use. And generally how government could support civic hacking, libraries, having maker spaces, upskilling libraries to be hackers, or hiring hackers to be librarians. Just thinking about that skill set in a different way. And schools start early, even in elementary school, getting kids to do computers, do Scratch, creating a culture of hacking, creating after-school coding clubs. We invest a ton of energy, resources, money into sports, but we don't do that for people who don't work within, the traditional ways of sort of extracurricular activities. So I think really giving more to that for the type of kids that aren't into sports, aren't into competitive extracurricular activities. Hacking can be competitive, but it's just different. Y'all know what I mean. And then government, I think holding school hacking competitions. I know that the military is doing that. I think there's, just like having hacking competitions, having high schools compete in hacking competitions. And just organizing hackathons, bringing people together to play with their data and help them, help the suits, understand what the culture of the t-shirt and jeans are, and just being more willing to experiment. And I think that stuff like that really changes the culture internally. And so lastly, this is the Oakland A's mascot. He or they showed up to our library one day and walked into the hacking, the narwhal coding. Just want to shout out to the libraries that are doing this, especially our local library. It was invaluable in getting, us to kind of move and progress and create a community of civic hacking, or just hacking, and giving kids the opportunity to just be creative and celebrate one another, and also governments that are sharing data and doing it in a way that's very intentional. And also Orlando, he's the guy on the left. He's the guy that helped make all that happen. And none of this would have happened without, Orlando. And I think it's important for us as a community, libraries, governments, to really be giving folks like Orlando who are hosting maker fairs, buying hardware, knowing what hardware to buy so that kids can do Scratch, and really just giving them the space for that. And I can't say enough about Orlando and, what one person did to, really impact people and inspire, me and Elias to do the work that we're doing. And this is just the links to what we did. It's on usa.govfresh.com. Rhett's posting that in. Thank you, Rhett. So I think that's it. I know there's a lot of questions and comments. Les, I don't know if you've seen them, but we can copy these and save them for your scrapbook. But they're awesome. And Melinda, I don't know if you want to facilitate questions, but it looks like there are a couple of questions. But thanks everybody.
There are. I've seen a lot.
Oh, I just want to thank everybody for showing up. There's a couple of folks here that I'm very familiar with, so I want to thank y'all. But everybody really, thanks for taking the time to hear us and what we've been doing and giving Elias the opportunity to present his work.
This was so great. I'm going to say it's a small group. Folks who have put in questions, why not just pop on and ask questions? I know one, I'll just pop in there. One thing people are asking is, how do you decide when you're looking at all of this data, which data to put in your visualizations?
There's some of them, stuff gets left out, but like there's a lot that's very technical, especially for the survey markers. So some of it is how much I understand, or like most people can understand, and then also what we can fit into the design or what we can figure out how to display.
Yeah, and some of it was just like with the COVID stuff, it was just like COVID's happening. Let's see how the data looks. And yeah, it was just kind of random. I mean, the geodetic thing was totally random. And it he found it on YouTube and we were like looking at it, and then I was just starting to think like, how can we build something with this? Just being curious, like it'd be cool to do this. Is there data for it? Any other questions? I think so. So do we want to look through these questions, or do folks just want to start yelling questions?
Yeah, I was hoping people would just hop on and engage a bit. I'm going to give a space for that.
I have a question. Did the National Geodetic Survey, did you ever reach out to them and did they ever respond? Because what you built was really cool. I would think they would want to promote it.
Do you want to answer that one,
or? You can answer it. I'll add color to it.
I think we found someone on LinkedIn or something and sent them a message. I don't know if they responded.
They didn't. So it was funny. The geodetic thing is funny because we would go and we would do something, and Elias would be submitting these things, and we joked, like after a couple of weeks, we would joke and say, somebody who gets this, we named him Clark. Clark, every Sunday night, he's got anxiety and doesn't sleep well because his inbox or fax machine is going to be full of like our submissions. And we just had this running story about Clark that was funny. But yeah, nobody responded. I mean, that's like, one of the challenges I was saying, Mary, is just figuring out a feedback loop, and sadly, there's just very little of that. I mean, there are, GitHub repos of data where people are hosting data that they're doing a better job of, but most of it is not really well managed as far as providing feedback loops. But yeah, if y'all know somebody, I mean, this is VIP right here, so I'm sure somebody knows somebody from NGF. Get them an internship next year. I see Zach has a question. Whoops.
Dustin has a hand up.
Oh. Uh-oh.
You know me, Luke. I'm using the official channels here with my virtual
I
hand
know
raised.
you're all formal.
So first of all, Elias, amazing work. I've been super impressed. All the way back to when Paul was interviewing you. So amazing work, and I'm a true fan of yours. I'm curious, before your dad responds to this question, kind of what you make of the generative AI landscape. So as you think about public data and accessibility, what do you think about tools like ChatGPT, Code Interpreter, other things that are starting to emerge in the landscape? And have you had an opportunity to play with any of them?
Yeah, I've used them, especially in my own things and on the CAL FIRE. Instead of, it's like easier than Google, or if I need a specific thing or trying to figure out, like, it helped a lot with the navigating how to get data from CAL FIRE. So it's really useful, but I think we shouldn't, it gives you a lot of stuff that doesn't work or is just wrong. So it still needs to be, you need to have someone looking at it, but it's definitely been really useful.
Great, thanks for that. And then same question to your dad.
My answer would blow everybody's mind, and I don't want to do that to you. I've been using ChatGPT for random things. I actually started using it I think we talked about this, but started using it to clean up code within the project. I'm not the right person to be asking about AI, to be honest. Zach has a question. Yeah, so Zach's met the family. Emmett is our younger son, and there you are. He did a little bit of Scratch, but he's not as into the coding stuff. He's kind of starting to do it a little bit or talk about doing it, but he's not as into it as Elias. So it would be fun if they would do it together, but we haven't advanced to that stage.
Elias, what hardware do you need for Scratch? Mary wants to know.
I think you really just need any computer. I mean, if you're building something really big or really you might need a stronger one, but if your kid has a school issued computer, that'll work. You just go to the website, you don't need to download anything, and you can use it and it'll run on anything.
Yeah, and Mary, there's like controller, like if you look up like Makey, they're like these controllers that you can plug into the computer that will allow you to like make games and control them. There's a lot of stuff that, I think there's whatever that website is that produces Makey. I think they have stuff too that you can buy to add on. But there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I think there's a whole like opportunities that government or that businesses have taken to build things that you can plug into Scratch. It's pretty amazing.
Great. Well, I know we're pretty much on our time box. So we'll wrap up, but we want to thank you both so much for being here. This is really what the demo days are all about, is getting into the nitty-gritty of what we're actually working on. And I know we all have a bunch of ideas now to take back to our work, whatever that may be. What we have going here at Technologists for the Public Good is a lot of events like this. So Rhett is going to drop some links into the chat. For those of you that aren't part of the group, please sign up. It's free. We've got a great Slack channel going with jobs and discussions and events and all of the things. So hope you'll check that out. And also, I think you can, we'll share post-event recordings materials, all links to all the stuff that Luke and Elias have shared with us, and also ways to stay in touch with them if you would like. So thanks, everyone, and thank you again, both you, Luke and Elias. We appreciate you. Everyone have a wonderful night.
Thank you, Melinda. Thanks, everybody.